Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Good afternoon, everybody.
Oh my
I hope you don't mind the English, since we have all foreign guests and some Greeks. But anyway, today marks a big day for us. 20 years of Dimand, 20 years of leading the way in redeveloping and refining the urban Greek fabric. In a world where cities are being reimagined, it's very important to see what Greece can actually gain from foreign and urban good practices. And as you are all aware, Dimand is very conscious in design and very respectful in architecture. So we believe that good architecture shapes the cities, and it's a catalyst to forming the new urban landscape in all reinvented cities. For this reason, we're very glad and very happy that we have with us a bunch of well-respected, well-known, established, and very successful individuals, that each one of them represent one of the biggest offices with a big impact on projects and urban regenerations. So here with me, we have Neiheiser from Neiheiser Argyros, Jette Cathrin Hopp from Snøhetta, Julian Lipscombe from Bennetts Associates, Marianthi Tatari from UNS, and Michael Jones from Foster & Partners. And of course, Dimitris Andriopoulos, who is going to be hosting this conversation with me. Before we start, I want to say that this is not going to be, a formal, panel discussion. We want, and also it's, the fact that it's very late, so I'm sure that all of you are very tired. We want to have a bit of a relaxed conversation about, the cities in Greece, and discuss the opportunities that, Greece might have in gaining good examples from what these people have to say, what they have done in relevant projects, and what they can see from their experience across the world. Additionally, I was reading a research the other day stating that 27% of Athenians are likely to move out of Athens. And then I was thinking that when do you say that, a city becomes home for you, for somebody? When you feel pride about the city, when you have, good experience and, it's easy to go around, and when you have the sense of belonging. So I would like to ask all of you whether you have ever considered moving out of Athens. How many of you? Raise your hands. Not a lot. Well, according to the study that I was reading, 27% are likely to move out of Athens. But the majority of these 27% is young people from the age of 18 to 34, no kids. And the percentage of the people that are not going to move out are the people that are more or less our age, I would say above 50. So that's, food for thought. I would just like to, make the first question, just to start the dialogue. What is your perception of the Greek city? Who would like to start? Ryan?
The perception of the Greek city?
Yep.
Well, first of all, thank you, Olga and Dimitris.
Ryan, be frank.
I'll be frank.
Please, do not buy time. Not political answers are accepted today.
Yeah, I can give an anecdote about my first experience of the Greek city and my ongoing relationship with it. For full transparency, my partner is Greek, and we do practice both in London and in Athens, so I do have quite a bit of experience.
You're biased.
But when I first came to Athens, it was a unique experience that did feel very different. I grew up in America. I live in London now, and I've lived there for 10 years. And obviously, Athens is a very different kind of place. This was in 2010 or so. It was probably my first time in Athens. So a very different place then than it is even now. look, it's a lot of things. It's exciting. It's dynamic. It's hard to walk on the sidewalk. There's a lot of yellow lights at night, and it feels sometimes like it. My first experience was that it felt like it should be a bit unsafe, based on my experience of American cities are the kind of places where it kind of gets dark and things. But the longer you spend here, the more I have fallen in love with the city. Many things, and I hope that we come around to a kind of real diagnosis of the kind of positives and negatives of the city, because there are a lot of things that are really beautiful about the Greek city, I do think, and a lot of those are tied up in historical developments around the platia and the relationship between tavernas and squares and the church, the ways that kind of institutions, even informal institutions, kind of organize themselves around platias. The relationship of landscape in the city, I think, is pretty exciting in Athens, even though it's known for being a city that has the kind of one of the lowest percentages of public space across all EU capitals. It still feels very much like a green city to me, kind of a three-dimensional green city that you experience in a lot of the balconies filled with foliage as you walk around the city. It's obviously sometimes a difficult place to work and build. There are a lot of things that, bureaucratic kind of obstacles to getting things made. But there's a lot of exciting change happening now. That's a first response. Maybe I'll let others pick up on that and circle back around.
Marianthi, you're Greek.
Yes.
But you live and work in Amsterdam, correct? So how do you feel visiting?
Yes, I was also going to say that I grew up in a Greek city, Thessaloniki, by the way. So for me,
Are you from Thessaloniki?
Yes.
So we gave you the wrong project.
No, you didn't.
Instead of canvas, you should design figs.
No, you didn't.
Oh my goodness. Terrible mistake, Olga.
What I think is what is very, very nice in Greek cities, or my experience, is that you see the layers of history. And this is something that when you move to, I lived for a while in Los Angeles, also in Amsterdam, you don't see this history building up from so long ago. And that is something that shapes us as citizens, shapes our culture. I don't want to reference only to the ancient Greece, but everything that happens in between. And actually, we are by default, I think, city makers, that we build the layer above the layer. And for me, this is really important in my background. Maybe also because Thessaloniki is very urban and dense. That's how I feel it more present. And actually, what is also very nice is that you can get away from the city very close to mountain and water. And that is something that we really appreciate in the Greek city.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I used to live in Amsterdam, so I'm going to do compare and contrast, because my impression of Athens, which is a negative impression, I'd say, is very dominated by the car. So to listen to the mayor a minute ago,
Don't point at me.
No, sorry. But listening to the mayor a minute ago, Athens is a beautiful, beautiful city, but it's dominated very heavily by cars. That's my perception. And it would be a fantastic place if it could be somehow redefined to be less reliant and have a better infrastructure that would enable cars to be less overt in everyday. I find it very challenging to get from one side of the city to the other. Maybe that's me as a foreigner, but that was my first introduction to Athens.
Okay, but yet landing from Oslo to Athens and taking a taxi to drive downtown, tell us your feelings about what you see, the way people are driving, everything coming to your mind.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because obviously I come from Norway, so we are kind of an unurbanized country. Only 5 million people, with some urban centers like Oslo, Trondheim. And Oslo is of a similar size as Athens, actually, which is quite interesting. We are all around 700,000 inhabitants in the city center. But I agree with you, what you said. I am completely in love with Athens, first of all. Every time I'm very kind of intrigued when I'm traveling, because I think it has the perfect mix, because I'm traveling a lot in Europe. It has kind of the Parisian elegance, it has a rock and roll vibe, it has a kind of effortless kind of appearance, and I love also, and my first experience with Athens is all about the people you meet. I think the socializing and kind of valuing the encounter between people, that is something that I always bring back to the more colder part of the world, where we say, for example, after COVID, everyone was happy. Oh, we can actually go to the 5-meter distance again. And you asked me about when coming from the airport. Yeah, of course, the traffic is an issue, obviously, and it gets denser and denser the more you can actually sense when you approach Athens. Oh, now I'm almost there, because you end up in a traffic jam, obviously. But what I also love about Athens, because it has the kind of the richness or the potential of the proximity, but obviously it has it's not very pedestrian friendly. No? And I started to look into some facts, which I found actually quite interesting, that 40% of the pavements are less than 1 meter. And more than 57%, I think they are in very bad shape, and 5% don't have any pavement at all.
Is the mayor still here?
No, but I found that quite interesting.
Yeah.
So obviously it's about that you need to rethink your city and putting the civic space into the center, but that might be something we will discuss later. So, well, I'm an Athens fan, just to...
Impressive.
So disorder is charming. This is what I keep from what you're saying.
I mean, I've been coming here for 7 years now, thanks to the two of you, for the work that we've been doing together. And Greece has always been somewhere that I've loved, and I've got to know Athens really, really well. I've also got to know Thessaloniki really well. And I had an experience on night before last that sort of summed up my relationship with Greek cities. I mean, as I say, I absolutely love them. And when I got there, I had a long journey with big delays and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, right, put the bag down in the hotel. I'm going to go out for a walk. I'm going to go for a volta. I thought I'd do, the proper traditional thing of going out and walking along the seafront. And so I set off with, high expectations and, came down towards the waterfront. And then I stood there while about 5 minutes of traffic absolutely hammered past me. And I thought, okay, yeah, keep the dream alive, keep the dream alive. Yeah, the seafront is almost there. I got over the road, and then I was walking along, voltering, very happily. And then the sidewalk along the harbour edge has been narrowed to allow for a cycle lane, but also for electric scooters. And I nearly got taken out, I would say, about 3 or 4 times by somebody on an electric scooter. And so it sort of shattered my dreams of this sort of, romantic me on my own walk along the waterfront. And it just sort of struck me that if only that part of the waterfront of Thessaloniki could be freed of cars. If only you could move the scooters back to the other side of the frontage there. If only the edge into the water wasn't a precipitous harbour edge drop, but it was somehow something that enabled you to get down to the water. My dream, my sort of, Thessalonican dreams would have been alive and well. So there's so much potential there, but my word, you have to work hard to get it.
But I have to say that we are now comparing cities with maybe other European cities. But if we go to the US, where you have the sidewalk, which is like 30 centimeters high, or it is an accessible city. It is a city that is lively. It has people. It has people meeting others, and also. In a way, what you miss maybe in other centers is that you will kind of go downtown and meet someone, and then kind of continue your stroll or your evening, and that is something that you don't find in a lot of cities. Maybe if we look beyond Europe, Because if we compare to Europe, then it is, of course, the car very dominant. But if we look outside towards Middle East or the US or Asia, it is, I think, on its own way, human-centric.
So what would be the 5 main things that you would propose to make all Greek cities more livable? And what actually makes them livable?
5 is too much.
5.
Yeah,
I think my
Three?
five
Okay,
would
three.
be
Two.
my 5 would be pavements, 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 pavements.
See, it's cheating.
But a disincentivization of using cars. So, we have, in different places around the world, including in America, I have to say, where I've been doing some work in Boston, and there's huge initiatives in Boston to take out cars, which you wouldn't really think would be the case in a big US city, but for the very point of connecting the water to the city, they did the big dig, they've buried lots of cars there. They've really taken it seriously, and the city's become incredibly livable as a consequence. And
How do you do this, though? Because
Wow.
here, I mean, we develop a lot of, buildings, a lot of projects, and, the end users always ask for more and more and more and more parking spaces. So when you have a lot of parking spaces, it means that, you give access, you give, the opportunity for, cars to be driving around,
But
a
that's
lot.
what I mean by disincentivization.
So how do you tackle it then?
If you're in London and you want to build a big building, you're not allowed to put parking in it.
Yeah.
And if people have to pay to use the road every day, they don't. And if they, there are lots and lots of layers to the disincentivization, and it works. I have to say it works. It's just, I can remember a time when London was like Athens. It was clogged full of cars.
But it works because of the subway network you have.
Which is
So
part
it
of
might work in Athens 50 years down the road.
It's not a quick fix, but
Yeah.
if you don't start somewhere and you don't begin to build, you'll never get to a point of maybe being a more pedestrian-friendly city, which I think is key to pretty much all of the new sustainable development we're doing all over the world. It's accessibility, pedestrianisation, and a familiarity of people not in their cars,
And
I think
about
it
safety and
needs this-
comfort.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, please, carry on.
No, I just want to say, because I think safety and comfort within a city is a really big topic that comes hand in hand with...
But it's a lot
digitalization.
safer to be on a street full of people
Yeah,
than one full of
exactly.
cars.
Exactly.
If it's an empty sidewalk,
No dark corners. Yeah.
critical mass of people brings with it lots of other benefits.
Yeah.
So pavements,
Pavements,
cars. What is next?
I think that the city or the municipality needs a clear strategy, a vision for the city in order to kind of what we have
Strategy.
identified.
What do you mean by strategy?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get rid of the cars, you need to implement a strategy for that, and then you're not allowed to build cars anymore. And at the same time, obviously, invest in public infrastructure. That has been done in Oslo. And there's been a lot of, not everyone has been happy with that, especially the commercial sector was complaining, but now everyone is kind of celebrating, like when you go to Paris, for example. So there are initiatives, but there need to be a collaboration between the public and the private sector with a clear strategy.
I think there needs to be, before the strategy, there needs to be a kind of collective agreement that enough is enough. So I think, Michael, I think London got to that point where the start of the
We'd all had
move
enough.
towards congestion charge and things like that is that the people of London, the politicians, the people, everybody said, look, London is absolutely choking with traffic. We can't get anywhere quickly. The air quality is absolutely appalling. Something has got to change. And so there was a kind of moment of realization that we had to do it, and then we moved into the sort of, the strategy phase. But without that kind of...
Julian, we have an issue, and it's a cultural issue in Greece. Collective agreements do not exist in this country.
Well, there wasn't one in Britain either. I mean, it wasn't an
easy.
agreement, but people got used to it. It's a different thing, everybody in the end accepts a new status quo, and that you are better getting on the train, you are better, and it just becomes a different way of life, a much nicer way of life. I
Ryan?
have to say.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about how you get from A to B. Like you said, it's like a 50-year investment to kind of build up the kind of transport infrastructure that we're all kind of take for granted in other European cities that allow it to have the kind of luxury of not being so car-centric. I think that there are some American examples, actually, of kind of cities that didn't have public transport systems, that still don't have great subway systems, for instance, but have over time implemented a series of different kind of bus strategies, light rail strategies, transport hub where you kind of park your car and then kind of enter into a system that are kind of steps along the way without the kind of full investment of a subterranean train network that I'm sure people are thinking about. I know there is an urban plan for Athens that is thinking about that, and even looking back to some of the work of Doxiadis from 40, 50 years ago, kind of looking at the kind of regional plan for Athens, and I'm sure that there's some really smart people thinking about that, looking forward. And honestly, the recent initiative and the ongoing construction works of adding in the new subway line in Athens with the new parks being developed on top of that is all super positive, and obviously it takes time and is disruptive, but it'll all contribute. I mean, I think that Athens has a really great kind of original urban plan in my mind, the original triangle of Athens, with syntagma and ammonia and the kind of the third leg of the triangle, which is a little more ambiguous. But within that, there's a certain resistance to the car that actually gives it a lot of what is appealing about central Athens right now, is that you kind of get to a point where you're just going to get endlessly frustrated to go any further, and you kind of have to leave your car and depart on foot. And that's, I think, when a lot of us think about central Athens and what's really kind of captivating about it, it is kind of those places, at least for me. I mean, the areas of Plaka and Monastiraki, maybe sort of separate from some of the tourist intensity, or Kolonaki or Exarchia or up into Kypseli, where there is a kind of great urban density, mixity, heterogeneity, porosity that is really vibrant. Like, it's really great as it is. Obviously, there are transport issues, there are pavement issues. I might have some lighting issues, which I brought up at the beginning. I think just with some simple, better lighting, it could actually improve the feeling of a lot of these spaces quite a bit. But there's a lot that's already there that I think maybe just needs to be nurtured, celebrated, and kind of pulled up in a really subtle way, not necessarily in a kind of revolutionary way, but in a way that kind of recognizes and pinpoints and supports some of those things that are there.
There's another way to look at it, though. I mean, if you think about, I'm thinking again around the world of various projects, but it's sort of short-term gain doesn't bring long-term value. And if you can somehow join up public and private, and you can bring together some infrastructure, and a way of creating new places in a city is to make sure that they are connected and accessible. And then inherently, property, whether it's new, regenerated, developed, whatever, the values start to increase. So there's something in it for everybody. Obviously, the city gets a benefit, the people living in the city get a benefit, but property developers and owners also see a longer-term benefit because you get more senses of place, more regeneration projects, you get higher values around them, and it's you have to suffer a little bit of bumpy starts in order to see those long-term benefits. But there are long-term benefits, and if public and private can work a bit more in synergy with each other, everybody gets a piece of the action, as it were.
I would like to expand this thought that you have with saying that I think we often think that design is luxury, but for me, design has to be considered more like leadership, in a way that you bring stakeholders together, the public, the private, the city, the authorities, and in a way, with leadership, you move on towards the topics that we are discussing about accessibility, about development. And in that way, you can actually create transitory developments, initiatives, strategies. If you see design as a kind of an attitude towards positive engagement. And that is something that I think we all kind of bring with our practices, in a way, how can we listen bottom up, create initiatives top down, but merge everything together with also public and private, in a way create solutions that go beyond the districts and boundaries. That is very difficult and takes time, but has, I think, a very big impact on cities like Athens, as we talked about.
Okay, and saying that, I mean, you've been familiar with projects all over the earth, correct, all of you?
Yeah.
What about the idea of demolishing? Demolishing buildings, demolishing entire blocks. You know, I was reading a story about Paris. Now Paris is, you know, up there in the news with the Louvre case. And 200 years ago, somebody gave the order to Osman, and what we enjoy today as a city of Paris, it is the city center which was entirely demolished. And I'm not talking about the historic center of Athens, about the principle of demolishing. Do you have any examples?
Well, these days I think it's a bit more about microsurgery than, you know, whole scale. I mean, I want to pick up a bit. I mean, it is right. I want to pick up on. There's an incredibly good example, and talking examples probably helpful in London, which is the King's Cross development, which was a really dangerous, nasty piece of London that was underdeveloped, underdesigned, to your point. There was no design, and nobody wanted to go there. And a whole series of initiatives have completely transformed it into something incredible. And they are in part because, you know, on a government and a local level, lots of infrastructure was decided to collect it there around some very valuable buildings, which people weren't really sure they had any value until they've been shown to have value. So there was, you know, instead of the normal, well, sweep them all away and start again, some surgery to keep different assets, build around them, bring in lots of infrastructure and things that will really make people's life different, and then bring in a whole new layer of really top world-class design to sit around it. And it's become a destination, it's become a place. And the developers who put money into that seemingly very bad prospect in the early days have really seen the rewards from it. And I think those are the sort of themes that Athens could really stand to, well, and other Greek cities could really stand to think about very hard about, you know, short-term gains do not bring long-term value. Is there a way to think more long-term? I hate to use the word, but just something that will serve you better in the long run than the immediate.
Julian?
And King's Cross. Well, that's how we met, wasn't it, Dimitris?
Yeah, exactly. We met actually there.
Yeah, Dimitris expressed an interest in King's Cross. I got introduced to Dimitris, and I said, well, we've done the most buildings of any architect at King's Cross. Would you like to come and have a look? We had a walk around, and that was it. The
I remember it was the Facebook building back in that time.
We were working on the Meta headquarters at that point, and that was then completed. But I mean, King's Cross, brilliant example. It's been part of my life for 20 years. It's been, you know, a big part of my career, but it started with that, what I was saying earlier about that moment of realization from everybody that enough was enough. Things had gone too far. You know, it was a place of iniquity. It was just an awful location, and that there was something that needed to happen. And there were a few sort of catalytic moments that brought that about. There was a very bad fire in the underground in 1987. Which killed 31 people. And so there was a kind of a joint conversation by everybody in the city, the people as well, that must not happen again. The infrastructure there needs to be completely renewed. You know, so the government was sort of looking at King's Cross thinking, my God, this place needs to change. I think probably one of the trigger moments was that, King's Cross had become a centre of drugs and prostitution. And the head of our legal structure in the UK, the Director of Public Prosecutions, was actually caught curb crawling for a prostitute in King's Cross. Margaret Thatcher said, right, enough is enough. That place has got to change. And that just started a ball rolling. and it started a conversation, and it started a passion, a return of a passion for a place that the people of London had completely forgotten about.
So when was that exactly?
Pardon?
When was that exactly?
That was around that sort of time, late 80s, 90s, noughties. And then Argent started to get involved at that point, and it's 25 years later, it's pretty
But it was
much
also
finished.
when the government decided to embrace high-speed rail.
There we
they
go.
needed to bring a high-speed rail
There we
line.
go.
And that's what I mean about public and private. Suddenly,
So that was the catalyst.
well, it was one of the catalysts. There were many, but it was one of the ones that, you know, and now high-speed rail is a feature of Britain where it wasn't. And I know there's no high-speed rail in Greece to speak of, but, you know, there are lots of things that can work together to bring about change.
And another really important catalyst was, you know, sort of perhaps a really unlikely anchor tenant, which was the University of the Arts. So the university was spread around London to the fringes, and they, you know, Argent was sitting there, to your point, Dimitris, about what should we do about existing building stock? You know, Argent was sitting there with, the developer was sitting there with lots of historic buildings. They had no idea what to do with them. And somebody said, we've got 5,000 art students. Could you put them somewhere? And they went, do you want to go in there? And it was the perfect marriage. And so 5,000 really creative brains started walking that journey into the site. People started to imagine what that place could be. Facebook and Google, Meta and Google are there, they say, in part because of those 5,000 bright brains and that transport infrastructure investment. And it's started to snowball from there.
So you had transportation,
Yep.
you had educational facility for 5,000 students,
Yeah.
and if I'm not mistaken, you also had at the same time King's Place, which was a
Yes.
cultural facility.
Yeah.
So these were the main uses
Yeah.
around that time.
And we won the Olympics.
And
We won the Olympics in 2005.
Yeah.
All of the train services were going to go from King's Cross to Stratford. So £3 billion worth of transport investment went into the place which in 1987 had caught fire. So, you know, I mean, it started right from
think
But they
what
made
is
a
it-
place. I think you used the word. You said the place. They made a place.
Yeah.
And there's lots of potential in Athens to make a place.
And
But
you're
what I
right.
think is very nice in this example is that it's also connected. It's not an island. It's not a place that you take your car or you take the
We don't
metro.
need to.
Yeah, and you take the metro and you go there and then you disappear. It is very well connected to the surroundings. So I think that is also maybe a definition of a good place.
Yeah,
and
but
it's-
you said, creating a place. What is your opinion about Ellinikon becoming a place or an extension of the city? Because you're also...
I have to be a bit careful. Although I'm not working on that myself. Well,
Yet I'm coming to Norway in a while.
Yeah. It's a long journey, so I understand.
yeah.
Start now.
I'm coming, I'm flying now. From Oslo to Bergen.
There's many ways to create a place, I think, and part of it is,
Ellinikon is
Having
going to become a place or not?
well, you have to have a reason to go there. And I'm not, I don't know enough about it. I mean, maybe you...
Well, I mean, that's what is also so, you have your waterfront city. And when you're in Athens, you're not experiencing the waterfront at all. So obviously, Hellenikon is fantastic potential to bring Athens closer to the water again. Because when you, as you also say, when you try to reach the waterfront, there's a big highway.
Yeah, even more
And
so
you
now.
try to, you're not even. So I think it has a lot of potential, but it feels obviously a little bit detached.
I wonder as well.
But
whether
one
it's
of the key questions about it is its edges as well. Just to come back to the King's Cross, feeling like it's part of the city as well. And I mean, I think it has different aspirations for the kind of center of it. But I hope that at the edges it starts to maybe over time stitch itself into the surrounding neighborhoods, into the waterfront.
How do you get there? Sorry,
How do you?
get there?
Metro,
Well, it's
Subway,
subway,
tram,
Okay.
driving.
That's why.
surfing.
but also back to
Greeks are connected with the car. It's
I
difficult
can,
to explain. I can arrange a meeting with you with a therapist tomorrow to explain you the connection.
Well, I think British people would have argued that once as well, especially Londoners,
Oh,
but
yeah.
not anymore.
Yeah.
I have worked on a project in Austin. We're talking about American
Austin,
cities, in Austin about a light rail and doing public engagement. And you know, Texans love their cars as well.
Do they?
Big
And
ones.
there are big ones as well. And on that, I think there is, of course, public initiative, civic initiative, public initiative. But there is also, how do you approach the public? How do we approach the people? Do you just do a survey and then you just receive complaints? Do you start designing? We did cognitive research and experience design, and in a way approach the people, make them part of your research, but also when you start designing, take them along and show them how it will feel if they use these means. So in a way, don't also treat the people like they don't have an opinion or like their opinion is small.
Okay.
So I think how you engage also matters. And this is a very local sentiment because, you know, in Athens it's different than in Austin, it's different than in Boston or in London. So.
But interesting, we have a pair of projects in Silicon Valley. The first of which is how do you get there, because Silicon Valley is not very, and everyone gets in the car. So to try and everyone hates it. If you ask them, everyone hates the drive to Silicon Valley from San Francisco. So we're doing a project which is the rapid transport system to get people there quickly. And then, hey presto, on the back of that, we're doing a whole new, it's a city center, which is building up around that, because once you get there, you need a place to get to. So, and the developers are seeing the real, you know, potential of creating, you know, there is no center to Silicon Valley, it needs one. There's a ton of people there, getting there is so you resolve a whole sequence of issues and everybody gets something out of it. And I think there must be places in Athens that, or around Athens where the same is true.
At that point of place, I think that's super important. You asked, you know, what sort of place do you think Ellinikon is going to be? My honest answer would be, I'm not sure. My firm hope, you know, your point, Jette, is that, you know, the connection to the waterfront is one of the rare opportunities, you know, for that to happen in Athens, and you know, if that could just permeate its way across the rest of the waterfront, that would be amazing. But at the moment, I don't know. I desperately hope it's going to have an Athenian quality of place. My fear is that, like a lot of other kind of large developments of its type, it may develop that sort of modern placelessness, where you know, if you drop somebody in there blindfolded, took the blindfold and say, right, where are you in the world? You tell me, based on what you see around you, a sensibility about a place, you know, is that, you know, can you really tell where you are? I mean, I was at a conference in Mumbai last year, and there was a young developer who was saying, we want to make Mumbai more like Dubai. And I said, for God's sake, don't do that. Please don't do that. Make Mumbai more like Mumbai. Kolkata more like Kolkata. London more like London. Athens more like Athens. Do not do that ubiquitousness of space.
Agree.
And this Ellinikon is the largest redevelopment area in Europe.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
By far.
It's quite impressive, no?
Yeah.
And I was always wondering, you have this fantastic heritage buildings from the Finnish Saarinen. Why you're not starting with those and activate kind of the sense of place with what is already there, rather than starting from the new build? Because you were asking about, should we demolish or should we build new? And I think this is an important. I was thinking about that all the time, because that's a quite critical question. We are all representatives of the building industry, and we are all aware what it means in terms of the CO2 footprint and to reaching or not reaching the Paris Agreement. And in that consequence, everything that is already built. So when you take that as a point of departure, also the urban discourse is completely different.
However, sometimes you need to demolish because you need to create.
Yeah, that's
spaces.
why Haussmann is a good example. Yeah, but you have to think differently. I think you have to start thinking from the existing rather than the opposite way. It's a completely, it's a change of mindset, and we see that more and more. Also, when we work abroad in Europe, and we always say we will not demolish everything. This is kind of the starting point. This is our canvas. And then, of course, obviously, you have to carefully do your analysis. And sometimes you have to take something away to free up potential and to make it a more livable space. For example, we are working now on the first net zero development in Milan, the transformation of a former slaughterhouse area, 200,000 square meter in total. And also the point of departure where these cathedrals of the industrial cathedrals, the large industrial building, they will get public program. You start with a public realm, and then you add and have a completely different development strategy when you start from reading the potential of what is already there and inserting, repurposing, retrofit, and adding something new and thinking it from outside in. I think that is the importance of landscape is so much under-communicated. So I think it's a completely different mindset that is required in the
More
urban.
and more that's legislated though,
Yeah.
right? I mean, in London now, you can't demolish till you've proved you have to.
Yeah.
Demolition is not, it's not even on the table till you've proved that the building or the site that you have got to work with requires it. Which
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's clear we've moved beyond the 1940s, 1950s. Like when there's a slum, you clear it and you build all new. I think King's Cross is a good example of a big part of the success of it is keeping some of the industrial buildings that are there, the canal, the kind of character that's like gives it a richness, which is a kind of enviable in other big London projects right now as well, which don't necessarily have that built-in character. I mean, you know, Battersea has also kind of traded off of that a little bit, but a little bit maybe less successfully, or overwhelmed it a little bit more. We've worked on projects out in North Greenwich, where it's a kind of a blank slate. I mean, there is an industrial past, but it doesn't have the residual infrastructure that King's Cross or Battersea had. And the big challenge there has been how to make a place, how to make a real place when building an entirely new development, which is, you know, that's a project that gets confronted by a lot of developers around the world, is how to actually give this place something distinctive, unique, attractive, that will draw people there.
Maybe you should, you know, just mention how, you know, Greenwich Peninsula used to be 30 years ago. Because I think most people know about King's Cross, but they don't know a lot about, you know, Greenwich Peninsula.
The Greenwich Peninsula is where the O2 Arena is. So the Millennium Dome, which was built, you know, for the Millennium. Prior to that, it was, I mean, the Londoners can probably say more, but it was hundreds of years of industry. It was rope and cables and all kinds of things being made there that ended up polluting the site, and multiple developers had tried over the last 50 years to try and turn it into something and failed, and there has been a lot of traction lately. One of the real catalysts was the Millennium Dome kind of putting it on the map. There were some fits and starts and stops and starts, and there still is a bit of that. I think there have been some interesting developments there, though. I mean, part of the value that has gotten out of it is trying to look closely at the attributes it does have, which is the river. You know, it has 2 kilometers of Thames River that flow around it, and trying to bring in anchor kind of institutions like Ravensbourne College, which is there, and this thing called the Design District, which was a really smart way as well. Ultimately, it's going to be a lot of office buildings and residential buildings, but there needs to be the ingredients in place to give it a sense that there's a there. And that has to do a little bit with the landscape and with attracting the right kind of key institutions first, which then lay the groundwork that everything else can be built off of.
So if you agree from demolishing, let's go to something more creative. I'm convinced that in the years to come, we're going to see a city, I don't know in how many years, full of robotaxis, e-bikes, subway, you know, trains of all kinds, public transport, 0 cars. Where do you think, in which country, which place, which city is going to be the first one to see something like that?
Well, in California, we're already being asked to design streets for that eventuality. So what happens to the parking when it's no longer needed? What happens to, and so you conceive of the streetscape in terms of time of what will happen when exactly that is the case. So it's
So California, you think, is going to be the place?
well, I think California is certainly very minded to set the standard and try and put. If you go there now, you can be in a robo-taxi and on your scooter, so they really are embracing all of that. But the question for us as designers in the public realm is, well then what? What do you do with the street when it doesn't have cars on it? What do you do?
What is going to happen?
Well, you design streets now for the future, not for now. I think that's the way we're coming at it. So it's very much future looking.
But driverless cars are still cars on the street, right?
They are.
So we have to get those.
But you don't need to own one. You don't need one to park one. It doesn't need to sit outside your residence
I
at
used one in
night.
San Francisco, actually.
Yeah, it can go off somewhere else and look after itself. It can, there are many, many different challenges to driverless cars, and the infrastructure of charging that driven cars do not represent. So there's lots of opportunity that come with that, including an incredibly positive potential for public realm. So
Absolutely, and air quality,
Definitely.
acoustics. Naturally ventilated buildings in cities will be possible just about everywhere because you're not dealing with noise of cars or the pollution that comes from cars. That could have a transformative effect. Already in Manchester, where I do a lot of work, we are starting to envisage streets of the type that you talk about, Michael, how those will, what they're going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time. Of course, the first couple of iterations of that, we've got a reasonable idea about it. The later ones, we've got sort of no idea, given the pace of change. But we're designing a car park at the moment, but nobody's calling it a car park. It's called a storage facility. Yeah. Because it'll only be a car park for 5 years, then it'll be something else, and then something else, and then something else. So buildings that can have those multiple lives, because the one thing that is not slowing down is the pace of change.
We've been commissioned by car manufacturers to come up with solutions and designs for how to deal with all of this in the future, because it's not just an urban issue. For a manufacturer of a car, it's a huge issue of, how do we, when shared car ownership is the model. So I hate to break it to the Greek culture, but, let's just say everyone doesn't have their own car and there's a lot more shared ownership. Life becomes a very different.
Yeah, this is what I do also in Amsterdam. I have a share car, but I think when we design now, to your point, Dimitris, about public realm and also any mobility project or street-related project, we actually design for different modes of mobility. So you create not one single truth, the car or the metro, but you create for use of car that can be later adjusted. You create shared car possibilities. You create micro-mobility, bikes, pedestrians. So in a way, you break down the scale much more than the typical pavement, let's say, paving car duality. And that is, I think, where it becomes a bit more permeable, or maybe blur the boundaries in a way that you can then have this street shifting towards a carless street.
Mm-hmm. Can I put another dimension here? Because we've talked about, different examples, and, I can understand that, connectivity, transportation, accessibility, all these are, have been taken care of, and they work on all these examples. But on the other hand, a city, in order to become, livable, it has to be safe, and it has to be affordable. Where do these cities stand on this? Because I don't think that any of them are affordable or safe.
Well, maybe I can. I mean, I live in the
maybe
city.
Oslo.
Yeah,
okay.
no.
Okay.
You invited a Nordic representative as well, so maybe I can use Oslo as a good example, because Oslo has gone through a significant transformation over the last 20 years, I have to say. It has kind of reoriented itself and reinvented itself as a waterfront city. So I think that impacted traffic, mobility, activating the waterfront, the conversion of industrial harbor into a civic space, and thinking everything of the kind of pedestrian civic perspective, walkable distances, also investing tremendously in infrastructure, e-mobility. I think Norway is the leading country, obviously, when it comes to that, also having governmental initiative and investment and to support that development. And I speak also from a privileged perspective because I come from a rich country, so there are there is a potential also to enhance all this kind of development. But still, I think it shows when public and private, government, municipality, and private investment work together in a more entrepreneurial spirit, what you can achieve in a quite short time frame. So, and that's why we have a lot of visitors also coming, and also when you see how kind of cultural buildings strategically are used as a catalyst for urban development. I mean, we have designed the opera, but there are public libraries, art museums, so they are strategically kind of placed in investment along the waterfront, and renaming Oslo as the fjord city, Fjordbyen, which means reorientating to the main asset towards the south, which is the waterfront. So I think it's a good example, even though I know we are a small country, but still when you need to share a vision, everyone has to work along that accordingly. And maybe it's easier in the Nordic countries where there is a tradition also of collaboration and a kind of bottom-down decision-making, and everyone is needed in that process, obviously. But still, I think there's a lot to learn when you also look at Copenhagen, for example. Look at the Nordic city. How did they work with their assets, and how did they prioritize the sound living conditions, which safety obviously is also part of air quality, prioritization of pedestrians. In Copenhagen, biking is default means of transportation. Then you have a different hierarchy of transport. So a lot of these kind of strategies are coming together. And
you're right about affordability, though. Well, affordability, I say, is one of the biggest criteria for. It's one of the biggest challenges, affordable housing and things, as we've heard earlier in the day. But I would say that, yes, it's very unaffordable to live in the middle of London.
Yeah.
Totally. But with all of these infrastructure investments and with the ability to move more smoothly through the city, brackets not in cars, you can get from A to B. The city has kind of, the places where people want to live has grown because you can get quickly to a bigger radius of, they've been developed as a consequence. People have more options than they used to have rather than being constrained into a much smaller geographic. And so, I think, there is something for everybody now in London where perhaps, without all of that, there wouldn't be.
And Ryan, you mentioned earlier about the sort of permeability of edges. Sorry to mention King's Cross again, but for me, I think that's one of the most successful things. And when I spoke to Roger Madeline, who was the original CEO of Argent, the guy who secured the job, I said, Roger, what is the thing that you are most proud about? Expecting that he might say the Meta deal or the Google deal or the University of the Arts deal. He said, the thing I'm most proud about is that the local people from the local housing estates, the social housing all around, that they feel welcome here. Mm-hmm. He said, for me, that is what the city is all about. What's the percentage of affordable
housing in King's Cross?
And student housing, ton of student housing.
Yeah, I can't remember the percentage of, but there's a generous provision of. But, I suppose the point I'm trying to make is it's not about the boundary of King's Cross, and that within that there are some areas of affordability. I mean, there are areas of incredibly expensive housing as well. I wouldn't call King's Cross an affordable place, but the point is that the edges of it are permeable, and the local people have been made to feel welcome. The way that the place, from a safety point of view, there are security guards who wander the place, but they're not called security guards. They're called guardians or hosts or whatever it is. And they don't chase the local kids off. The local kids come in and play in those fountains in Granary Square. They are welcome. And so it's a major development with permeable edges, and it's something for everybody. I think there's a really nice example there, perhaps, of the way the cities could evolve. Ellinikon, can it? How permeable can, to your point, Ryan? How permeable can its edges be?
Okay.
So are you positive with the idea of Ellinikon creating also affordable housing? Because when the principal of Ellinikon 2 years ago said publicly that we were thinking to create affordable housing there as well, the majority of Greeks, they were shocked. And they said, we pay 15,000 euros per square meter, and we're going to have at the edge of the project affordable housing as well. So what is your view on that?
Well, again, it's mandated you can't build without a percentage of affordable housing on the same site. So it's a fact of life in Britain.
In Britain it's mandatory, but in Greece is your option.
Well, that's an option. But that's what I'm saying about public and private. If it becomes the norm, it's an expectation. It's not, something that people just accept it.
But I think it's also about what makes a good city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think at the core of what I would define as a good city would be a kind of diversity, not just of socioeconomic classes, but also of different races, maybe of different ages, of kind of people from different backgrounds. And that fundamentally is kind of what makes a vibrant city a vibrant city. And so if you want to think about Ellinikon as an extension of the city, I think it would need to have a certain level of kind of diversity within it, however that might be defined here. If it wants to be thought about in a different kind of way, as a more of a kind of a resort or a getaway or a kind of an exclusive kind of space, then it's defining itself in a different way. But
by definition, it is an extension of the city. It cannot be gated. It is an extension of the city.
Yeah.
This is the way it should be.
Yeah.
It's huge.
But also maybe in a way of services and kind of that it's not only destination amenities, but also, what you have in a city.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this takes time, but it needs planning. And as we said in Britain, but also in Germany or in the percentage of affordable housing in projects is quite high in a way. And the price range is also quite wide. So it is not something that is unusual.
And you want the affordability. We want, nurses and teachers and firemen, and we want all those people who make the city work to be able to live there. So you have to do it. It's not optional
What is the practice in Holland for this?
Yeah, it is actually with the affordability, the percentage either in a master plan or kind of an urban design that you have affordable housing. Of course, the moment you say affordable housing, or in the US, it is something that people don't like, but it is a bit about more market range housing, so it's not kind of the peak or the luxury. So in a way, bringing people, blurring the boundaries between the existing...
Blend the people.
Otherwise, you create islands, what we said. Yeah.
So speaking about the cities and the future of big cities, we are facing already the climate crisis, not climate change. And in New York, New York is famous for a number of things, but it's famous also for the population of rats. And the last 10 years, I was reading, that is official data, that the population of rats from 2 million went up to 3 million. So they have a new policy now replacing the plastic garbage bags with containers, because there are so many. So which one do you think are going to be the future challenges in the big cities?
Well,
having the example of New York.
Could the New York issue, and maybe something observational, could it be a slowing down of the regime of garbage collection rather than the bags that it's put in? I mean, there were different mayors have had a very different attitude to that. So from my perception, it could just...
Now something came to my mind.
Oh dear.
We have I've seen with my eyes another system in Greece with the garbage bags. From the 7th floor, the guy goes out and does this, bam, and goes to the center of the container.
Well, I was thinking more frequency.
Okay.
What means?
Okay.
It's a bit the same in London, but New York for sure. The regularity with which the streets are serviced, cleaned, which again is a feature of infrastructure. I think you can see real changes when different regimes have very different policies or budgets or whatever. So. But climate change, for sure, not to dismiss that, is obviously...
Do you take into consideration when you design now the climate change?
Yes.
You do?
Of course. Obviously, to try and limit it and do sustainable development in the broadest possible sense. But yes, designing for a future that we don't quite yet understand and know is a big, making buildings resilient, adaptable, all of the things that the future will probably require, for sure. It's a big part of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think on a city scale, it's even more challenging.
Ryan, you're familiar with New York.
I'll triangulate a little bit.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, obviously in terms of sustainable design and the climate crisis, there's all kinds of, smart and dumb technologies that everybody's thinking about in order to put that into buildings. But I think somebody had mentioned earlier designing car parks now to be able to turn into what they're going to be after there's cars. And I do think that designing buildings in a way that they can then be adapted into something that we don't yet know what they're going to be is a huge part of, actually it's one of the most sustainable things that you can do as a designer. Somebody had once told me that the loft spaces in Soho, New York Soho, so bringing it back to the rats. In Soho in New York, that they were built in the kind of mid-19th century as these industrial buildings. So the buildings that I don't know if you ever walk around the kind of shopping district of Soho, where it's all the kind of fanciest shops now, but Soho has gone through a pretty immense change from industrial to obviously then being kind of cleared out when actually Robert Moses thought he was going to bring the expressway through there, to then the artists moving in the 50s and 60s and having studios there, and then them becoming kind of residences and then very high-end residences, and now kind of global brands have moved in. But this one building typology, this kind of medium-scale infill building type with really high ceilings and strong structural capacity has kind of excelled over 150 years in many different ways, and that's a really smart way of designing.
Very good example.
Yeah.
Very good example.
Jette?
I think the
Challenges?
No. I was just thinking because we all know the scenarios that in 2050 the majority of the world population will live in cities. So we have to deal with a lot of things: infrastructure, housing capacity for all kind of the full range. Infrastructure, but I think, at least on our agenda, is again putting the public realm and the civic space in the center of urban development. How we deal with water management, how we deal with the temperature, the increased temperature in the outdoor space, using landscapes strategically, because obviously we know when you work in a smart way and utilize the competence, you can decrease temperature significantly, only selecting the right plants. And so I think this for us is a very, very important strategy, and that also put the inhabitants in the center of the thinking and design from there. I think that's an important, again, what I said previously with the mindset, but I think that is an important level of consciousness, and also something we have to sometimes also remind our clients on that this is how you experience the city, where you meet. This is also how you will kind of experience the quality of life outside your apartment. I think that's a very important aspect.
Yeah. Well, even the proportion of the streets, just, Haussmann, go on a hot summer's day into a boulevard in Paris, it's hot. But if you're starting with a new urban plan, just the shape, the form, the proportion of the streets can do so much to support, temperatures, heat sink islands, all the sorts of issues that we have to deal with. Thinking has come a long way from just big gracious boulevards, and it's a lot more form follow function in regard
designing
to
them
climate
intelligently, Michael, so you don't put major services where you might one day, once the amount of traffic is reduced, you might actually want to plant a line of trees there. So just be really intelligent with where we're putting stuff, because we rip our cities apart regularly every day because, with all best intentions, somebody's put in a particular place. It usually is in the wrong place, and then we sort of, we rip things to shreds. But the thing that sort of bothers me most about the future is creaking infrastructure. You mentioned about rats and refuse. There's a lot of stuff going on with water in London at the moment because we took a ridiculous decision to privatise our water industry. Never, ever. If anybody suggests, I don't know what the status is here, but if anybody suggests it, do not do it. We've got a kind of situation now where, because the water authority in London, the pipes a lot of them are Victorian, they're leaking. It's their OPEX money that would have to pay for those to be repaired, but they're just envisaging a scheme at the moment, which is to, rather than fixing all the leaks, they're going to extract water from the Thames near where I live, pump it to North London, which is where the problem is, and then pump treated sewage back into the river where I live to deal with that problem. And that is a capex thing because they get money from government. Oh, that is ridiculous. But if you're sitting there as Thames Water, you are thinking, well, I'm going to play the system. I'm going to make it work for me and my shareholders. So it's those kind of things that worry.
We have similar issues and challenges ahead of us with the water.
Yeah.
This global issue is not only Greek or London issue, but approaching the end, and we have to respect the time because then follows, I think, another session, and
One more
then
session.
is the party. Are you ready for drinks?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I was thinking that we forgot to have Aperol Spritz as a sponsor here and have
That
the
would have been
drinks in
nice.
front of us from now. But anyway, so closing that, I was thinking that just 10 years ago, back in 2015, many Greek architectural offices or designers, they were closing the offices because of the Greek crisis. Many of them, they were reducing staff. And just 10 years later, Greek economy again is back. We have all the international offices like yours designing, Renzo Piano as well, Chipperfield, and this is very encouraging for the city, for the economy, for the future of all of us. And thank you very much for accepting the invitation, of sharing thoughts with us. And we're always open to recommendations. And Olga?
Exchange more ideas.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for working us.